why do we want to think about democracy in global affairs? I mean, with Anders, I think we want to make these things come bottom up as best we can, but we are also in a very top-down global world at the moment. A lot of the major problems that we face in contemporary society are very global in character. Whether it's health problems, financial problems, ecological problems, they are global in character. They span the planet. And the rules and the policy processes to answer those global problems are also very global. IMF, United Nations, G20, and a lot of private governance that many people have never even heard about. Hedge Fund Standards Board. You probably never thought that hedge funds have standards, but there is a Hedge Fund Standards Board that's behind the scenes regulating how hedge funds work. Not in the common interest, to be sure, but setting up rules for that. A lot of the rules are global, a lot of the regulations are global. The movements to resist them must also therefore be global. Coming out of local realities for sure, but globally connected, I think, in the way that Anders was suggesting. Again, not as formal institutions perhaps, but still talking with each other and coordinating. And I think in that way many things that we need to do. What kind of global, Shimri said, what would we think global democracy looked like? I'll just give you 5 thoughts of mine. But again, they're only mine. One, and that builds on something I just said now, I think democratic action in global affairs needs to be, sorry, you're going to say, oh, gone as an academic. But let me just say the word and then you can run away. Transscalar. What I mean by transscalar is that I mean they need to connect global, regional, national, local, and household realities. Global democracy begins in your own home. It lives in your own local community. It goes through your nation and your nation state to the extent that you can. It operates through regional networks. It operates through global networks. Remember, global networks can be Via Campesina, Global Peasants Network. It can be the International Lesbian and Gay, Transsexual and Intersex Association. It can be the trade union movements, not only the formal International Trade Union Confederation, but also various informal labor internationals which are operating behind the scenes. So a lot of the global connections can be amongst the people who want to get voice, participation, and influence. Yeah, I've got some more of those if you need to get okay, so I would say, yes, be local, but make sure you connect nationally, regionally, and globally, because the powers against which you resist are very connected and very powerful regional and globally. If you don't do that yourself, you will be crushed. So I think it is a transscalar sort of thing that one needs to do. Second idea, I would say in a global democracy is let plural solidarities live. Let plural identities live. Don't only come into this as your nation and your national identity. Come in it with your class identity. Come in it with your faith-based identity if you have one. Come into it with your sexual identity, your racial identity. There are lots of ways to form solidarities in global politics. Coming at it just from your nation and your national identity is awfully narrow and often won't allow you to connect to the people that you want to connect with. So that's kind of a second idea. Third idea is cultural sensitivity and cultural pluralism and maybe transcultural discussion. As I said before, global democracy is not, or shouldn't be, the West telling the rest what to do. We've had that for many, many centuries. And there's a little bit of a worry that if you look at most people who are talking about global democracy today, most of the people that are publishing on it, most of the people that are being active on it, are very Western based. But that's not what the majority of humanity is necessarily coming from. And if you want a global democracy that is democratically meaningful to everybody across the globe, then it can't be a Western cultural export. It's got to be formed by talking across cultures and talking across people. I'm not saying that we should therefore say, oh, the Chinese government is fine to crush human rights. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying that there are lots of people in China at the moment, not the party, not the government. There are lots of people in China who are very interested about democracy and democratizing global affairs. But they don't necessarily want to do it via Westminster. They got their own ideas. Ditto in India, ditto in Africa, ditto in Latin America, ditto with indigenous peoples, ditto in Russia. Look what's happening on the streets of Moscow at the moment.
countries that are not in debt.
Say again?
All the countries that are not in debt.
All the countries that are not in debt. Yeah, but some countries that are in debt as well.
Not in debt.
Well, no, the number of the countries in Africa are having quite a... Yeah, no, but I mean, again, the debt movements in Africa, maybe not only now, but in the last 10, 20 years before a lot of the debt was cancelled, a lot of interesting ideas about democracy were coming out of those circles. Very powerful. But yeah, they don't get the mic. They don't get the mic, and it's really important to get the mic and you do that also because if you are global democracy movement in the West, you make sure you let go of the mic and let some other people speak. I'm a little bit sensitive that I'm holding the mic, but at least while I hold the mic, I'm going to say that I should not have the mic.
You have a couple more minutes.
Huh?
You
okay.
haven't got the mic much longer.
Okay, no, good. Okay, two last points. I think if we're talking about democracy and global affairs, we've got to talk about redistribution of resources. In other words, it's all fine to talk about, oh, we're going to recognize people's identities, we're going to recognize people's cultures, everybody's going to... If people are going to have the mic, they also need to have the resources to be able to hold the mic, and they need to have the time to be able to speak into the mic. And if they're living heavily burdened lives in which they can barely get from A to B, then they're not going to be able to participate on an equal basis with everyone else. So I think we do need to think, whether it's through financial transaction taxes, whether it's through new intellectual property laws, whether it's through, I mean, there's all kinds of proposals around. There are ways to change the rules of the global economy so that everyone gets a fair shake. And that's, you can't talk about global democracy without doing that, it seems to me. And lastly, fifth point, so I talked about trans-scalar relations, I talked about plural solidarities, I talked about being culturally sensitive, I talked about a kind of a political economy of redistribution. The last thing, I think you've got to think ecology as well. Because if you're going to talk about democracy and not relate humanity to the wider web of life, hey, we can talk about all our wonderful democracy while we die, because the ecological issues are very, very pressing. And so for too long, we've talked in a very human-centered way about democracy, that democracy is just about us as human beings getting on with things, while the wider web of life, the wider nature goes to pot. Maybe we could get away with that in earlier generations, but in the next century, we approach it that way at our peril, and the peril of all of life on the planet as well. So again, think ecologically while you think democratically too, and maybe we start to have a little bit of a basis for it. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, thanks a lot.